All right, I think this should be working. So again, we are doing questions. We gave 13 minutes to do 15. You'd get 15 minutes to do 15, so you'd have a little bit of wiggle room. I'm just trying to make it short. Starting with question number 7. So this is what it looks like. And the excerpt. What began as a protest movement is being challenged today to translate its political movement. So think about this. It says, what began as a protest movement is being challenged to translate itself into a political movement. Notice they're saying it's being challenged to translate itself into a political movement. We're talking about challenges, and we're talking about the civil rights movement. It is now concerned not merely with removing barriers to full opportunity, but with achieving the fact of equality. From sit-ins and freedom rides, we have gone into rent strikes, boycotts, community organization, and political action. As a consequence of this natural evolution, the Negro today finds himself stymied by obstacles of far greater magnitude than the legal barriers he was attacking before: automation, urban decay, de facto school segregation. The excerpt was most directly written in response to which of the following? D. You get D? Yeah. D. Success of the civil rights movement and achieving legal and legislative victories. That one's I would expect most of us to get that right. Is there any questions about any of the other choices? This would be the time to ask. Yeah.
I just got a question. What does stymied mean?
Stymied means stalled, stopped, hindered. To stymie something is to try and stop its progress. To stymie. Good question. 8 is tough. 8 is probably the toughest of this question set. Statistics on which of the following could best be used to support the argument made in the excerpt. Now, the correct answer is B. Did anyone put A? Okay, so a lot of us put A. Now, and let me explain. This is okay. When I first looked at this, I had to read this one twice. I did get to B, but I had to read it real carefully. It said the statistics on which of the following could best be used to support the argument. In the beginning of that quote, it said, we began as a protest movement. It's now being challenged to translate itself into a political movement. So it is concerned not merely with removing barriers to full opportunity, but with achieving the fact of equality. This quote comes from what year? 65. What happened in 64 and 65? Civil Rights and the Voting Rights Act. And we just talked about this today. So they had achieved the right to vote, and we know that these new laws actually had the teeth to start implementing it. What's left to achieve? Well, income equality, challenging racial tensions and racial beliefs. And so if you take a look at percentage of African Americans registered to vote, you're going to see that drastically goes up in 1965 and onward. But if we're looking at what's challenging of far greater magnitude than the legal barriers, is talking about like racist attitudes and inequality. That's a real tough one. Do not beat yourself up if you're wrong. I think 85 to 90% of the kids across the country get that one wrong. So 9, the civil rights movement. The civil rights movement's shift in focus described in the excerpt most directly. This is C, increases amongst activists over strategies and goals. We started touching on this today about after 1965, there is a shift in whether or not nonviolence should be continued to be embraced, or whether or not more violent means were going to be a quicker way to affect change. Any questions on that one?
I thought it was I put B because I thought it was up to 65. They kept getting more nonviolent than after 65.
And so 1964 is the turning point. Yeah, there's going to be riots in 64, 65. There's really bad riots in Watts, California, the Watts community of California. Really, really bad rioting. I would say anything after 64. So we'll say 65 onward is going to be more of this argument. 64 is really where you start seeing the fracturing of the nonviolent protests and things like that. And that's probably my fault. And so don't beat yourself up. It's just a good thing to know in case there's a question on that regarding that on the AP test. 10. The activism, like I said, we did not cover 10 at all. The activism described in the excerpt most directly helped inspire renewed social and political activism by American Indians. I do want you to take a look real quick at the way they worded that. Helped inspire renewed social and political activism. I just think that's a good way to word even something like the progressive era, right? We just wrote a DBQ on that. Renewed social and political activism is a way to say they were desiring change. It just sounds a little better. It gives you a little more ring to your paper, yeah.
So is this like the point where Native Americans are like getting land from from court cases and stuff like that?
That's
Is that what they're talking about?
I got to go back and look. I don't know I can't think of any of the Supreme Court cases off the top of my head. I'll have to go back and look at it over the weekend. I'll get you an answer. Remind me on Monday. I'll write myself a note. I don't know about the land policy right in the early 1970s. I gotta take another look at it. All right. 11 is on the New Deal. Do I need to read the whole passage or no? Okay, thanks. Which of the following historical evidence could best be used to support Kennedy's argument? The correct answer is A, the passage of legislation providing unemployment insurance. Yes? Yes?
Yeah.
Okay. Any question? Any questions on that one? 12. The political realignment described in the excerpt contributed most directly to D, the greater identification of working class communities with the Democratic Party. Did we talk about this shift of the, I think we did at some point, talk about African Americans increasingly voting for Democrats, the Democratic Party during the New Deal. It was widespread across working class, but a lot of those middle and lower class citizens are going to be minorities. 13, which of the following most likely sought to limit the New Deal reforms described in the excerpt? This one is, the correct answer is C. The key there is the Supreme Court. You should know that the Supreme Court fought Roosevelt the entire time, and Congress the entire time, on New Deal programs. Yeah?
What was the thing that Roosevelt tried to do with adding more justice?
Court.
So he was so ticked off that the Supreme Court kept ruling his New Deal legislation, his and Congress's New Deal legislation, unconstitutional. He tried to put an amendment through Congress. He actually introduced a bill into Congress and said, Congress, will you please pass this? And it basically said for every Supreme Court justice that was over the age of, I think, 70, he could add another Supreme Court justice if they refused to retire. I mean, he was talking about creating 5 more or 6 more Supreme Court justice positions. It didn't fly. It actually gained him a lot of criticism, tons of criticism.
You know what that was called, though?
The court packing scheme is what it's always called. The FDR's court packing scheme. Court packing scheme. Can we move on to 15 to 18? The overall pattern of spending in the table. Yeah, how about 14? We'll do that one first. The New Deal drew most directly on which of the following earlier sets of ideas? Progressivism. C. Did anyone put populism? Okay, good. Progressivism.
Yeah, I remember that.
Huh? Is that any questions on those? 15, I think this one was manageable. This one, a lot of it dealt directly with that table. The overall pattern of spending in the table most directly reflects which of the following federal policy positions at the time? The answer is B. Federal power should be used both to aid United States citizens and to fight communism abroad. Why are we laughing? Oh, no, it's fine. Sorry, that sounded mean. I didn't know if, like, I was worried. Like, oh, no, do you have any questions on this one? Sorry, I didn't mean to scare you. Why are you laughing?
It just makes me laugh more.
It's like at the dinner table when your parents tell you stop laughing and you literally can't stop laughing. I got grounded. My brother and I couldn't stop. I literally couldn't stop. You think that's more laugh? You're grounded for a week. I was like, 16. The pattern in spending for national defense shown in the table most directly reflects which of the following? D. Efforts to contain communism in Southeast Asia. Yes?
Yeah.
I think a lot of these are like softballs. Like you lob them up there and they're real nice. And some of them are like real tough. It's just so ambiguous. I think we just got to make sure we don't miss the softball ones and if we get a couple of, navigate our way down to 2 answers on the really tough ones and try and do the best we can. 17. Which of the following developments after the Second World War most directly enabled the total spending shown in the table? That key word is enabled. What enabled our government to spend this money? And the correct answer is B, rising in general prosperity and expanding middle class. Are there any questions on this one? Why it's not another one? Any questions? I think the next closest answer is C, the conspicuous consumption of the baby boom generation. But people buying stuff doesn't mean that the federal government has that much more money, right? Money is dependent on taxes and things like that. So general rising prosperity and expanding middle class. More prosperity, more taxes people are paying. 18, the pattern of social services spending in the table is most similar to which of the following spending patterns in other historical periods? C, attempts to deal with the effects of the Great Depression in the 1930s. Key word there is social services. Social services meaning things you spend to make society better. Are they getting a little bit more manageable, do you feel? Okay. Last set. This one is, I think this was pretty easy. I was happy to see this one. Problems associated with the conditions depicted in the image most directly led to A, demands for increased federal regulation on industry. 20. Which of the following were most likely to have led organized opposition to the practices shown in the image? D, middle class women. What'd you put?
I put C, because that was the only other one that I knew factory owners would have a problem with it.
Give me an example of a middle class woman that's working to stop this stuff. Jane Addams, there you go.
Women is plural.
What?
I thought, did you know? I'm trying to find your question.
I thought they were going to say who would not want to do that.
Oh, did you say factory owners?
Yeah.
Hey, this is, thank you. Great point. Which would have been most opposed to these images, or opposed to having changes, and she made more. And I'm sure there's a lot of people that do the same thing if you are flying through it.
Yeah, I thought it was in 1909 that just the role of middle class women wouldn't be as like big.
It is. So the role of middle class women is going to be growing and expanding slowly but surely ever since the Second Great Awakening in the 1830s, 40s, and 50s. We see the Seneca Falls Convention in the 1840s. We see the abolition movement led by women. We see temperance movement largely led by women. Women are going to be, and middle class women especially, are going to be the voices of some of this protesting and some of this reform-minded sentiment. 21. Which of the following provided the strongest justification for the practices shown in the image? Social Darwinism. I think we hammered that one home pretty well in the beginning there. I would love to see a DBQ on the industrial. They have not done industrial revolution DBQ in a while. If I had to, don't quote me on this one. Don't hold me to this. If I had to take a shot in the dark on the DBQ, I say it's either going to be from like Carter, Reagan, or Bush, like something really new, which is why I'm lecturing on it next week and hoping that we get something. Or I think it could be an industrialization one. They're overdue for industrialization or something like that. Yeah.
In my notes from a while ago, I had that you said the possible LEQ would be the medium.
Yeah, I think that's a perennial candidate. You know what I mean? There's just so much on it they can ask about. So yeah, it could be. All right, take it off. Yeah. Okay, see ya. Would you rather review some material first, or would you rather take a look at an incredibly hard DBQ first? You want to do that? Okay. And then I'll review material around that. This is like an oh crap, you've got to be kidding me, they just did what type of. That's about how you felt about what? Really? That wasn't that hard. Oh, the populist party one? You guys did pretty well with it.
I mean, we did well because
Optimism thing. Hey, at some point this week, will you guys take a look at your cream words that you put down? That's good. Hey, yeah, if on those multiple choice, if out of the 15 questions, if you're minus 1, 2, 3, you're right there. Jacob. Come back! It knows you want to be a teacher. It's all right. So let's read this. This is nuts. I haven't read the documents in a long while, but this I know, but so it's 1630. Like it just think about all the classes that don't get a chance to review. They're running out of time, and teachers that don't want to spend time after school and they tell kids to review. What if you don't look at 1630s and you haven't talked about it all year or since the beginning of the year? That's scary. In what way did ideas and values held by Puritans influence political, economic, and social developments of the New England colonies from the 1630 through the 1660s? So this is a very, very, very limited time period. You are limited to 1630 to 1670 is your end. 1669 is your end. It's in the New England colonies only. So we're only talking New England colonies. And you must touch on social, political, and economic, right? Yeah. So, before I even start looking at the documents, I want to think about what I know. The New England colonies. Chris, give me one of them.
Massachusetts.
So Massachusetts. And because this is before these are like settlements we're talking, within Massachusetts you should be thinking of, the Massachusetts Bay. We should also be thinking of Plymouth, because both of these are going to be a part of the larger Massachusetts colony. Can we give any others? So Massachusetts, what other ones? This is why we got to do that. So that is going to be a southern one. So Virginia's out. Rhode Island would work. Connecticut. Jersey's the middle. Doesn't count. Yeah, and that's why we need to look at this. So Maryland's considered a southern. Yeah, it's too late. It's too early. Maryland comes later. So, New York's middle. Maine's too late. New Hampshire might be. I think New Hampshire is. We'll take. But regardless, these are the main ones. One thing you should know. Most conservative. What do we?
Massachusetts, because they were founded by the
Yeah. Right? Dominated by this is more liberal. Founded by people like Roger Williams. And Hutchinson. And Hooker, Thomas Hooker. He was kicked out of Massachusetts Bay. That's a different Hooker. What's so?
That's civil.
Yeah, Civil War. I don't know. But now here's where I would go with this, and this is tough. And I haven't even looked at the documents yet. I know that political and social are pretty much fused here. Political and social are fused. Like, the congregational church is the law-making body in these communities early on. Here, there's more, remember the Fundamental Orders of Connecticut, that's the first constitution, written constitution. There's also the idea of separation of church and state that is embraced by Rhode Islanders. So there's a little bit more separation between the social and the political. Does that make sense? So I'm going to put it like political and social are a little more separated. Also on the social aspect, they tended to be a little bit nicer to the Native Americans down there in Rhode Island, but I mean, that's a minor one. As far as economic goes, there's a lot of similarities. They are involved heavily with what?
It's not tobacco.
No, so it's not. It's
Lumbering.
so lumber is big. Anything with merchant trade with Great Britain, merchant trade. Fishing is huge.
Like raw materials.
There's also livestock. This is a big one. Do you know what I mean by livestock?
Like cows.
Cattle, cow, pigs, that kind of stuff. Livestock. Lumber, merchant trade, fishing, livestock. Was there anything else that we missed? Whaling?
I guess you'd say.
No indigo. All right. So, Puritans influence political, economic, and social development. Now, here's the question. A lot did provide evidence in the DBQs you just did, but you also kind of strayed from the question. If the question says, what were the gains and what was the limitations and address both. You have to address both. And this says, in what ways did ideas and values held by the Puritans influence political, social, and economic development? Well, the Puritans, for example, one of their ideas and values they held was not to get wealthy quickly by exploiting the environment and natural resources. They were not looking to get rich quick, like the settlements in Virginia and other places there. And so you could talk about how from an economic standpoint, that was a secondary focus. Their big focus, what was the biggest focus of the Puritans? Religious freedom. Religious freedom is their primary focus. They are fleeing Great Britain and fleeing Western Europe to come here. And so my centerpiece of this is religion is the focal point of these societies, which makes sense why religion and the church, the congregational church, is also the political body in these colonies. Yeah.
So could you talk about like Jamestown for your synthesis point and how like they were trying to get
Unlike other areas and other settlements like Jamestown, the Puritans were not looking to get rich. They were seeking religious freedom. And then you get your synthesis point for talking about other things. You could also get your synthesis point for talking about the fact of, not the Great Awakening, nope, too early for the Great Awakening. You could talk about the Protestant Reformation going on in Europe, and that being the stimulus that sent people eventually fleeing to America for exploration. Did we talk about that at the beginning of the year? The split between the Protestant Church and the Catholic Church?
and the chart of the circles.
Yeah, sort of. Yeah, so you want to do circle time? Okay. So the most broad, I haven't done this in a while, and I messed it up for I think 5th hour last semester. Protestantism or Protestants are your biggest category. So when the Protestant Reformation happens, we know about how many theses were being church and the Catholic Church. Yes. Okay. So Protestants separated from the Catholic Church, and from there. You have who called sought to purify the Protestant church of all Catholic rituals. Do you follow so far? Protestants separate, but the Church of England services are still very much like Catholic Mass, and so there was a movement to purify. All Catholic rituals. However, there was others that said absolutely not. We want to completely separate from this, we want complete separation from this Church of England. These are called separatists. Separatists. Separatists wanted to completely separate from the Church of England and form a new church. Separatists wanted to separate entirely from the Church of England and form their own new church. This church in which the congregation played a larger role. Those separatists wound up establishing their own churches throughout Western Europe. They were persecuted heavily in places like England. They were thrown in jail for holding these beliefs and trying to do this. And I don't know that much about church history in England in the 1600s, early 1600s, but from what I can understand, it was not a popular thing to do, nor was it smiled upon by the king. And those separatists who were looking to continue practicing their new, well, that's a bad word. These separatists that were looking to continue, what's the word I'm looking for? Practice their religion and religious beliefs that were so separate, completely separate from the Church of England. Some of them took a pilgrimage to the New World. The pilgrims are the ones that actually fled to the United States in search of religious freedom. And originally, the separatists, if I remember right, we'd have to look this up. I have it. I can actually look it up right now. I believe they originally went to the Netherlands for freedom, looking for freedom. Was it Denmark? Is it Denmark? Let's look. Ari, you might be right. I think.
It's a Nordic thing.
Yeah, it's one of the Nordic countries, and I don't.
Where did Congregationalists mean?
Huh?
Congregationalists.
Congregationalists are, so I think, the church is developed in this New England region. Do you follow there? I don't know if separatists still living in Europe were considered. I don't know if it applies to them. Doesn't matter. For AP test, people that landed in the New England region and were part of the church, they were the pilgrims, but for our purposes, the pilgrims that landed in the United States, they were Congregationalists. They were part of the Congregational Church, different than the Church of England, right? Different than the Anglican Church. The Anglican Church was prevalent in which region of the colonies? South. The Anglican Church is prevalent in the South. In the middle colonies, you have a bit of a hodgepodge of popular churches. The Anglican Church is somewhat popular. You also have German Lutherans there. Do we know this? You also have people from the Dutch Reformed Church, and I know nothing about that. But you have a little bit more diversity. New York, for example, is very diverse. Pennsylvania, for example, has a lot of German